War. War never changes, and along with the unchanging nature of war comes the way in which it's practiced. For many nations around the world, that means the use of mercenary armies to achieve objectives that are too expensive, politically sensitive, or secret for them to use regular military forces for. Mercenaries instead offer a much cheaper and more private alternative for a country looking for a solution for a particularly troublesome problem. Why would a nation, even a modern one like the US, Britain, or Russia, need mercenaries though? Well, for many nations, the hiring of mercenary forces is actually cheaper than either having a standing military of its own or using its own military forces to do the same job. Mercenaries typically come with a higher upfront cost than regular military forces might. For instance, the average US soldier earns around $30,000 a year, while a mercenary with the same level of experience could earn as much as $80,000 to $100,000 a year. In exchange for a higher upfront cost, a nation can avoid all the hidden costs of actually deploying their own military force. Things such as training, transportation, supply, and possibly even life insurance. These costs can add up significantly. For instance, the cost per flight hour for operating a C-17 can be around $20,000, so a 12-hour flight to get 2 platoons of infantry to a combat zone can already run a bill of $240,000. Mercenaries, on the other hand, are typically responsible for footing their own transportation, supply, and training costs. Another big appeal to using mercenary forces over conventional forces, though, is the plausible deniability involved in the use of mercenaries. Mercenaries aren't just paid well to fight well, they're paid well to keep secrets, and thus mercenaries can often be used to wage conflicts that their host nation doesn't want it known it's supporting. This is best exemplified by Russia, who routinely uses mercenaries in the Middle East, Africa, and Ukraine to push its own agenda while being able to deny all involvement. For countries at war, though, mercenaries have another huge appeal. They help avoid war weariness from the population. This was a big draw for the US, who turned to using mercenaries in Iraq and Afghanistan in order to keep the total casualty counts of the wars low on public media. Mercenary casualties, after all, are not publicly reported. Mercenaries also, however, can act as supplemental forces when needed. Once more, turning to the example of the US and its dual wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. As was famously noted by an American general, if the US truly wanted to fight both wars, it would have to institute a national draft, as the US military wasn't big enough to fight both wars while keeping its national priority of having enough forces available in reserve to fight a third war against a major power and win. The US could have called in forces from overseas to its Middle East conflicts, but doing so would have jeopardized its ability to respond to aggression from potential near-peer enemies, such as Russia or China. Thus, instead of instituting a draft to fulfill this shortfall, the US took to hiring mercenaries, and at one point, nearly half of all military forces in the region were mercenaries. Mercenaries have had a long and checkered history, but thanks to the Cold War, they were in serious decline around the world. With the political situation between the US and the Soviet Union being so sensitive, neither side could afford a large group of mercenaries causing irrevocable provocation against the other side. Thus, mercenary forces during the Cold War remained largely in the realm of third and second world nations, fighting internal conflicts or against their neighbors, while the US and Soviet Union only used smaller mercenary forces in various proxy conflicts. Thanks to the global war on terror, though, the use of mercenary forces has skyrocketed, with the need for experienced warfighters and thousands of US and other NATO soldiers being discharged from their respective militaries after serving their contracts. Groups of former soldiers came together to form powerful mercenary companies. These companies then simply hired themselves back out to the US and its NATO allies, helping fill a serious manpower shortfall in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. Today, mercenaries are in use all over the world, and many are worried that the continued use of mercenaries will allow nations to do things it wouldn't normally do thanks to public oversight of its military forces. Sadly, a new age of mercenaries may be upon us, but who are the biggest players in this dangerous arena today? Academy. Academy was originally known as Blackwater, which was and still very much is the most controversial mercenary agency in the world. Founded by a former Navy SEAL in 1997, Blackwater originally hired itself out as instructors to help train military and law enforcement organizations. But when the US invaded Afghanistan, Blackwater received its first contract from the US government to provide physical security to CIA bases involved in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. Eventually, their contracts grew to include the training of Iraq's new army and police forces, as well as providing fire support for coalition forces. Domestically, Blackwater was hired by the US government and several private companies to protect their installations in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. The company supported search and rescue efforts of stranded civilians by by dispatching a rescue team and helicopter to assist free of charge. Overseas, though, Blackwater quickly grew a reputation for being overly cruel and ruthless in its military actions in Iraq and Afghanistan. Numerous claims that Blackwater operatives were either targeting civilians or not working to limit the collateral damage of their engagements were made, and in 2007 the US government leveled charges against the company for its actions of its employees in an incident where 14 Iraqi civilians were killed and another 20 wounded. Ultimately, 4 Blackwater employees were found guilty and convicted. 1 man was sentenced to life in prison, while another 3 were given 30-year sentences. Shortly after the Nisour Square massacre, Blackwater began the process of rebranding itself, eventually becoming Academy. Today, Academy employs not just American mercenaries, but men from all over the world, and is involved in various ongoing conflicts, including the fighting in Yemen. Defion Internacional, a powerful mercenary company which most people have never heard of. Defion Internacional has been involved in many of the 21st century's biggest conflicts. Based in Lima, Peru, the company is best known for its employment of soldiers who come chiefly from second or third world nations, which allows Defion to pay its mercenaries extremely low wages. For instance, while an American mercenary agency may pay tens of thousands of dollars per contract, Defion created much public furor against it when it was discovered that it was paying its mercenaries as little as $1,000 a month. Most of Defion's contracts actually come from the American private military company Canopy, which outsourced security work within Baghdad's Green Zone to Defion. Interestingly, though, Defion Internacional also employs many personnel outside of the security industry, such as food handlers and preparers, English teachers, insurance agents, and doctors. Defion will often support foreign operations by not just providing security forces for rear areas, but by also providing the cooking and maintenance personnel that keep NATO bases working in conflict zones. Canopy. Merging with Academy to form Constellus Group, Canopy was for a long time one of the most elite private mercenary companies on the planet. Its founders were former U.S. Army Special Forces veterans, to include a number of Delta Force operators, and their agents specialized in not just providing physical security to facilities and VIPs, but in consulting with other agencies to help shore up their physical and cyber defenses. For the time it existed, Canopy may have been the most lethal private military force in the world. Its operatives were largely recruited from the various U.S. military Special Forces commands, to include U.S. Army Special Forces, Rangers, SEALs, Marine Special Operations Command, and some federal law enforcement agencies. Professional warfighters at their core, Canopy employees operated under a strict code of ethics, and in 2007 the company fired 2 employees for failing to report that their supervisor had fired on a civilian vehicle while in Iraq. The supervisor was himself also fired. Many have seen the merger of former Blackwater agency Academy and Canopy as an attempt by Academy to repair its seriously tarnished reputation. The Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is perhaps shrouded in more controversy than even former Blackwater security, and the agency has been outright banned from operating in several nations where NATO holds political sway. The true identity of the company is itself a mystery, and foreign policy experts are unsure if Wagner Group is truly an independent private military firm or simply a secret extension of the Russian Ministry of Defense. What is known is that Wagner Group employees are predominantly Russian and have taken part in every conflict that Russia has a political stake in. The Wagner Group is believed to be founded by a former Russian Special Forces Lieutenant Colonel Dmitry Valerievich Yutkin, serving with Russia's chief intelligence agency, the GRU. After his retirement, he began working for a Russian private security group which provided security personnel and training all over the world. Yutkin then joined a detachment of that security group known as the Slavonic Corps, dispatched to protect Chinese oil company assets and infrastructure in Syria. A disastrous ambush by ISIS personnel led to the deaths of many Russian mercenaries, and the Slavonic Corps was disbanded. Yutkin next showed up in Ukraine fighting on the side of the separatists and under the banner of the Wagner Group, a name allegedly chosen for Yutkin's fondness of the Third Reich. Wagner Group employees tend to be former Russian military personnel, though for a short time it operated a Serbian unit. Since 2015, the Wagner Group has shown up in conflicts from the war in Ukraine to Syria, Madagascar, Sudan, and Venezuela, to name a few, and always in direct support of Russian political objectives. The group may be best remembered, however, for an attack on American Special Forces base in Syria in February of 2018. American intelligence confirmed the presence of Wagner Group individuals, leading an attack by Syrian forces on a base held by a platoon's worth of American Special Forces soldiers and their Kurdish allies. U.S. forces held out against a force numbering in the hundreds, killing many and suffering only a single wounded in return. After the battle, various sources reported that the Wagner Group had suffered anywhere between 15 to as many as 200 casualties at the hands of the Americans, while the Russian government denied any knowledge of the incident. The secrecy surrounding the Wagner Group has made a true count of casualties impossible to determine. And most troubling, a Russian journalist investigating the issue was found in critical condition after having fallen from his fifth-floor balcony. He was in a coma for 3 days before dying due to his injuries. Russian officials claim the man had committed suicide. Yet another 3 journalists investigating the actions of the Wagner Group in Africa were ambushed by unknown gunmen and killed. In August 2019, a former Chechen commander and a veteran of Second Chechen War was gunned down in Berlin by a Russian man on a bicycle carrying a silenced pistol. The Russian was apprehended after being spotted throwing the gun and a bicycle into a nearby river, though his identity could not be confirmed as his travel documents and name given were all fake. An investigation by American and German journalists discovered that the man was using a passport number linked to Russia's Ministry of Internal Affairs, and it's suspected that he too was a member of the Wagner Group. Conflict between major powers may be at a historic low, yet while full-scale war seems less likely than ever, the use of mercenary forces to fight smaller conflicts around the world is more popular than ever. This rise in mercenaries has led to many fears of what the use of these rogue military forces could lead nations to do. And while some firms such as Canopy have solid reputations, others such as the Wagner Group and former Blackwater have proven that they care little for international laws. While conventional military forces can be kept accountable by the public, the actions of mercenaries often go unreported, and reporting on them can sadly sometimes be dangerous, as Russian reporters have often found. If you liked this video and learned anything new, then why stop now? Click on this video for more great information, or this video, which we know you'll be fascinated by. Both are great, both should be watched, but you've got to pick one for now, so do it.